Israel releases a backlog of over $1.2 billion in tax revenue to the Palestinian Authority. Tens of thousands of farmers in India march on the capital in a rage. A bank is put under siege and raided in Brazil. And a woman is arrested in Sweden for locking her child up for 28 years. This is the world at large, and we are Politics 1001. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The World at Large. This show is free for everyone. And to keep it that way, consider supporting us through the link in our description. You can support us by leaving a review, subscribing, and sharing with a friend as well. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of our podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The World at Large. And before I have Josh here to tell me about Israel and Palestine, I would like to give my biggest thanks to Jorgy Porgy 1, 2, 3. For leaving a review on our podcast. It was very kind, very constructive, mentioned our audio, and yes, we are working to improve our audio, so we appreciate you guys telling us what you want to see, how we can make this better, and I'm really excited to see that we're building a community here. But, without further ado, Josh, Israel, Palestine,
Yes.
What the heck is going on?
I will certainly get into that, but before I do, Jorgy Porgy also talked about Ian's shoulders, so thank you for that, because Ian does have the most beautiful shoulders.
Yes, I forgot. Thank you, Jorgy Porgy. That was the best part of your review.
The highlight of the review. Alright, so anyways, let's get into Israel-Palestine, because as per usual, there seems to be a little bit of an issue going on, but this seems like more of a light issue, right? Seems like something's actually going well. So, what exactly is happening? Well, a backlog of $1.2 billion in tax revenue has been transferred to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And so this was confirmed by both the Palestinian government as well as the Israeli Ministry of Finance. And so what is a backlog? Well, a backlog is just, it's like a buildup of sorts. So you're supposed to pay the money, this time, but you don't pay it, so it piles up and it piles up and it piles up. And so Israel owes the Palestinian Authority money every month on a monthly basis, and so it went like 7 months without paying the Palestinian Authority the money, and so there was a backlog. It built up and it built up and built up, and Israel finally paid the money. So why does it take this long? Well, usually the Palestinian Authority will receive about $190 million every month from Israel, but all of this was suspended in June when the Palestinian Authority cut off ties and cooperation with Israel under the threats of Benjamin Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to extend the Israeli sovereignty, as he likes to say, or as the Palestinian Authority says, annex parts of the West Bank. So Benjamin Netanyahu threatened to do that. Obviously, as Prime Minister, he has the ability to say that, and the Palestinian Authority looked at this as an annexation. They said, well, this is our land, this is our rightful land. Historically, this is our land. Arabs have always been here. And so that's not a case with a lot of the Jewish people, but a lot of them, there's also the fact that in order to reach the two-state solution, you need the West Bank to go completely to Palestine. So there's a debate going on there anyways. But nevertheless, the Likud, the Benjamin Netanyahu's party, has threatened to do that. They said they're going to extend Israeli sovereignty, and the Palestinian Authority didn't like that very much. They said, well, no, that's not your land. And so they cut off ties with Israel, said, we're done cooperating with these Israelis. They don't want to listen to us. Fine. Annex it. There's nothing I can do about it except cut off ties with you. We're done cooperating with security ties. And so Israel said, all right, that's fine. So let's proceed with this annexation as per normal. But then, in August came around, and the United Arab Emirates said, you know what? We're going to recognize the state of Israel as legitimate.
No way.
And so Israel said, all right, but you can't just do that. I mean, you're a member of the Arab world, you're a member of the Arab League. This would be huge. You can't just get away with that. You need a reason to do that. And the United Arab Emirates said, well, yeah, you're threatening to extend Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, so why don't you just say you're not going to do that? And then I will be happy to recognize you. It kind of gives me the excuse I need and the reason to recognize you as a state. So Israel says, all right, that's fine. I will make it unofficial of annexing the West Bank. I'll continue to control the parts of it, but I won't officially annex it. And so UAE said, all right, good for me. And they recognize the state of Israel. And so obviously that spiraled into Bahrain and Sudan also recognizing Israel. But anyways, that's what you saw. And so this kind of angered the Palestinian Authority. This also angered a lot of members of the Arab League. It also angered Iran. And so in Turkey, which Turkey also recognizes Israel, so quite weird. But I guess they don't like when other people recognize
Maybe
them.
he's jealous.
Dolan's just a jealous man.
Yeah.
And so Israel finally paid this backlog of money because the Palestinian Authority agreed to, fine. Well, now that Biden's coming into power and Biden is going to be a little bit more lenient with the Palestinian cause because as you know, the President Trump has been very, very pro-Israel, definitely the most pro-Israel president in the history of the United States, and so this kind of terrified the Palestinian Authority a little bit. So with Biden coming into power, they're a little bit more open with a less pro-Israel president coming into power. They're a little bit more open to cooperating once again with Israel in security ties, and especially with Israel not annexing the West Bank anymore. And so Israel said, all right, you're going to cooperate with us again? You know what, Palestine? You're going to get all that money we've been saving up for you. That $190 million a month for about 7 months, it's all going to you now. Congratulations. And so why does Israel, well, what is this money, first of all? Well, this money is just tax revenue from the West Bank, but according to a deal made in the 1990s, Israel controls, they control all of the tax revenue coming in from the West Bank and Palestine, as well as the mainland Israel. And so this is the deal that was made, and essentially they would collect the tax revenue and then just give it to the Palestinian Authority. And this makes up about 50% of the PA's revenue on a monthly basis. And so the Palestinian Authority has been struggling a lot economically, as are most countries in this world at this type of time with the coronavirus. And so they really needed the money, and they made this deal, and now they have the money, and it's all going good again. And so the Palestinian Authority foreign minister said, his name is Riyad al-Maliki, he said, and quote, "Right now, we are sending clear messages not only to the Israelis, not only to the Biden administration, but also to Europeans and many others that Palestine and the Palestinians are ready to re-engage completely with Israel." So that means they're not going to hate each other as much. Do not worry, guys. They're still going to hate each other a lot, but maybe a little bit less. We'll see.
I got scared there. If they stopped hating each other, we might have to stop this whole podcast. We'll lose whole segments.
Yeah, but that does not mean there's going to be peace. It just means that they're going to be cooperating once again, because Israel and Palestine have always cooperated for security purposes in terms of countering terrorism, especially in the West Bank. So quite an interesting story there. And again, that was $1.2 billion that were sent to the Palestinian Authority. So now Israel's not $1.2 billion in debt to them. All right. So let's move on to the biggest story that will be of the podcast. You guys on our Instagram, Politics1001, you should go follow that. You guys requested this a few times. I've seen requested general a lot about this.
Yes.
And that we should cover the farmers in India and what's going on there. Well, lucky for you, I did research it. I did read about it, and I now understand it. And yes. I'm going to tell you, what's happening over there, because it's actually really, really important. So,
okay, what's happening over there?
Well, what's happening? Well, first of all, the protests have emerged in India regarding the needs of the farmers. So again, this has to do with the agricultural sector of India. So tens of thousands of people, that's right, tens of thousands, have showed up to the Indian capital of New Delhi demanding a change in the recent law in the agricultural sector. And agriculture, in case you are unaware, employs about 58% of the entire Indian workforce. It's about 15% of the Indian economy, but it's 58% of the workforce. So there's a disparity there, but tens of thousands of people, that's why it's not very surprising, because so many people work in that field in India of over 1 billion people. So the protesters, they went to New Delhi and they tried to get into the city, but before they did that, they had to cut off the city. So they cut off the roads going in and out of the city. They drove up to the city in their tractors, and they set up tents in the roads. They used tractors to block the roads. They were being really inconvenient for the average New Delhi citizen, or Delhi citizen, because New Delhi is inside of Delhi, and so that's quite interesting. And so, according to people on the ground, I don't know this for sure, but this is according to the Associated Press, I believe. This was about 30 kilometers or 19 miles of people that were just spread out around the city. So that's certainly a hard thing to ignore. It stands out, I would say. So thousands of protesters attempted to actually enter the city, but that's where the police were like, nope, you're not actually coming in here. We already have a lot of COVID. There's already literally millions of people in the city. We're not going to be taking in thousands of farmers. And so the police opened fire on the protesters, but not Not guns. Don't worry. They used water cannons.
Oh,
They used
okay.
tear gas. But what are water cannons if you don't know? Water cannons are the thing that firemen use. Those giant hoses that spray tons of water at a time in it. If you get hit with a water cannon, it's not like a Nerf gun. In fact, it can hurt. It's a lot of water coming at a really fast pace.
If you're on fire, it'll put out that fire.
So maybe that's what they were trying to do.
Probably not.
And so, tear gas was also employed, but it's certainly important to mention that. And tear gas, again, is not lethal. It just makes your eyes hurt a lot. And so what were the protests actually about? Well, this was in regard to a recently revoked law by the Indian government that requires all the agricultural outputs from its farmers to be sold at a minimum price, which was 50% of the production cost. So, essentially, the government would guarantee the farmers that it would buy a certain amount of goods, which would, assuming the farmers produce them, allow the farmers to make investments for the upcoming year. So they have a good. Let's say they're growing we'll just say wheat, right? And so they grow this wheat. 50%. So it's 150% of the production cost, right? So whatever it is, plus they get 50% more than what they put into it. And the government would guarantee them that they would buy it at that price. And so this was good for the farmers in the sense that, well, they were always guaranteed the same amount of income every year. As long as they produced the good, the government would buy it for them. And they put a minimum price that they would have to buy it at, and the farmers would just go to this auction and people would just buy the goods for them. Only certain people were allowed at the auction, mostly just government officials, and they could just buy it, and then the government would then use those goods and distribute it to the rest of the population within their respective state. And the farmers could only sell their goods to the people inside their Indian state. And so that seems very restricted, right? It seems like a lot of regulation, but the Indian farmers actually like it because they were guaranteed a certain amount of profit. And so what essentially they created a security blanket for the farmers, right? And so they were able to make investments for the upcoming year before they actually sold their crops on their farm. They were able to make investments on their farm because they were guaranteed this profit. So it was easy for them to make these investments upcoming. And so what did the government do? Well, they pretty much got rid of this. And so now the farmers can sell to anyone they want from any part of the country at any price they want. And the Indian government has argued that this is the best way to see an increase in the income of their farmers, as well as increase the investment from the private sector due to profit motives. Because before, the private sector is not going to invest in something if it's a minimum price, the government buys everything. Like, how am I going to invest in this? The government just buys everything. And so they're saying all right, well, we're going to try to help you out. We're going to give you more of a profit incentive. You can now sell your goods to not just us, but you can sell it to anyone from any state inside India. A lot more freedom here. And so the farming unions, they said, yeah, we could make more profit, but also it goes the other way around. These large corporations who can afford to sell goods at lower prices could sell goods at lower prices and force us to lower our prices and make us struggle for cash or put us out of business or buy us out. So all of these are certainly possibilities, and I don't understand why we want to risk this. And so that's kind of the perspective of the farmers. How can a small farmer in India compete with a large corporation? And so that's kind of the issue that's going on right now. And this is especially true in years where crop yields are plentiful, and as there will be a surplus in food in the market, which naturally drives prices down. So if prices are driven down when there's a surplus, then now the government before would buy it at a certain price, like a guaranteed price. But if you let the free market decide the prices, then they'll be getting it for a lower price than what they would get if the government would just guarantee a certain price to buy it at. And so essentially a singular unit of food would not be as valuable in a surplus year. So it'd be good for the fact that people would not be hungry as much, but it would be bad for the farmers in the sense that they would not make as much money. So before, if this happened, again, the government would subsidize them. And so this is where kind of the debate is going on. Is the government in the right? Is the government good to encourage more free market here? Or is it better for them to just kind of subsidize the goods of the average Indian farmer? That's the debate going on.
Yes, it is.
But Canada decided that they were going to Canada, they stepped in and they said, we don't like this Hindu nationalist government trying to force new stuff onto the people, the farmers of India. Because Canada, under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, likes regulation. Trudeau is a big fan of regulation. He has said he likes it on multiple occasions. And the Indian government said in a statement, I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but they said, well, that's not appropriate. Why do you have to call us a Hindu nationalist government? we're just revoking this reform. You actually have nothing to do with this, Canada. And so
Clearly, he likes sniffing his nose in other people's business as well.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. That Canada decided to release a statement based on that. So India just countered that and said, "Well, why are you talking about this?"
I mean, that's what you could do if somebody's talking bad about you. You say, mind your own business.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what India's doing.
Yeah. So that was just a little bit of a weird skirmish going on between India and Canada on the international stage.
A war might break out.
I would not be surprised.
Then we'll have some content.
Oh, there we go. So anyways, we're going to move on now to another story. And this is happening over in Brazil, in the Brazilian city of Criciúma.
Are you pronouncing that right?
Criciúma. We're going to go with Criciúma.
Okay.
And what happened is 30 people participated in an attack on a bank, which was put under siege for 2 hours. And this resulted with local police also being unable to respond to the gang members sieging the bank because the gang members blocked the streets. They had AKs, assault rifles, and they were literally they surrounded the bank and they were blocking people from actually getting in. And when the police tried to come, the gang members would return fire. And so this allowed they split up into two teams, right? Like half of them defend the bank from police, the other half get into the vault. And so that's kind of what happened. They set off an explosion in the bank to steal a bunch of money. And surprisingly, no one actually died. There was a gunfight, but no one there were like 2 injuries, but no one actually died.
I'm kind of picturing like Old West style cowboy hats, revolvers, except they all speak Portuguese. And
well, kind of, but what it actually is a bunch of guys in hoods with masks on.
No cowboy
because they
hats.
respect COVID.
Oh, great!
And they're just surrounding the bank, and you can't see their face at all. And the police are just shooting at them. They're shooting back. I would say it's Old Western because they're all fair to each other, stand back to back, very formal in these duels. This was not very formal. This was guerrilla warfare 101.
More Red Dead Redemption style.
Oh yeah.
Maybe Canada's gonna send some cowboys down too. You never know.
Canada. That's where Brazil will be the battleground between India and Canada. And so after the effects, so we don't actually know how much money was stolen. All right, we don't know, but we do know that there was about 150,000 U.S. dollars, or in Brazilian currency, 850,000 reais stolen. Not stolen directly, but it was like in the streets because there was money everywhere. And the after event, it was like they set off an explosion and money went all over the streets. And they couldn't, because there was crossfire. The gang members were probably not as well trained as the military, so they kind of had to get out of there. And so that they did get out of there, but they had to leave a lot of money behind. And so there was a massive explosion, and money was seen all over the streets. And some people got arrested because some locals went to go pick up the money on the streets, and then the police said you're stealing and arrested them. So quite unfortunate indeed. So Mayor Salvaro, who's the mayor in Criciúma, he said this in a statement. As mayor of Criciúma, I ask that you stay home, don't leave home, and exercise all precaution. He went on to say that the police need space to do their jobs and, investigate why there was a shooting. And this is not, I would like to say this is surprising, but this actually happens a lot in Brazil. Just a few months ago, in like June or July, there was another bank that was attacked by gang members. So it seems like it's kind of a hobby for them to go around and sack banks.
Yeah, our hobby is podcasting. Their hobby is going around and laying siege to banks.
Yeah, and blowing them up. I mean, we all have our interests.
But apparently they're not cosplaying as cowboys.
No, they're just wearing hoods.
Maybe they have the money bag with the money symbol on it, and they're walking around in pinstripes.
You can always hope. And so reports have emerged that this was not just a normal bank. In fact, this was a regional treasury, which means it was a government-sponsored bank, which means government money was in there, which is even worse. Because there's one thing from stealing from the private sector. There's another when you steal the government's money. Because when you steal from other people, government's not as mad. When you steal from the government, big mad.
Government mad! Give me back money!
And so the government was quite angry. If this was true, but again, the government has denied these allegations, but the Associated Press speculated that maybe it is, a regional treasury, and this is just a report going around. Interesting little theory, but again, not confirmed. So you guys could sit on that and think about it, but while you're doing that, we're going to be talking about Germany and a raid that was just happened by the German police. So there's this political party, kind of more like a group, called the Wolf Brigade 44. And the Wolf Brigade 44 is a far, far, far right group. And they love swastikas, and they're very anti-Semitic. So, the whole bunch. And
I mean, you could kind of tell they didn't name themselves Unicorns 44. It's kind of a scary name.
Oh, they're named after one of the most elite brigades in Nazi Germany.
Oh, yeah, so that's definitely not unicorns. No.
Yeah, and so they're a far-right group, and they operated in Germany, and they were just banned by the central government. And so the German government claims that Wolf's Brigade 44 wants to reestablish a Nazi-like dictatorship, and for that, it is necessary that they are outlawed. It's not like here in the United States, where you could walk around and be a neo-Nazi and no one's going to touch you. It's pretty illegal to do that in Germany. And so the German government said, yeah, you know what? No. And so they said this in a quote. Whoever fights against the basic values of our free society will get to feel the resolute reaction of our government. There's no place in this country for an association that sows hatred and works on the resurrection of the Nazi state. So the German government, using this as their little reason to outlaw it, or saying, well, now it's outlawed, you can't actually do this, they raided 11 houses of the members of the Wolf's Brigade, and this was done by 180 police officers. And what did they find? Well, they found stuff such as swastika flags, they found machetes, and they found some crossbows. So, there you go. Oh. And the funds for the group that they used to have their meetings were also taken. So, pretty interesting. And this is not the only far-right group. There's been at least 4 at this point in the past few months that have been outlawed by the German government for pretty similar reasons, and that is establishing a Nazi dictatorship. That's what they want to do, at least.
Right. And use their crossbows to do that, apparently.
Overpower the police with their crossbows.
Ah, shucks, they took my crossbow. We'll have to...
It's a cool toy.
A toy? It's a weapon, Ma!
Alright, so anyways, very interesting story, but we're going to talk about our last story of the day. This is a very sad story, but I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. So there is a 70-year-old woman in Sweden. She lives in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, and she was arrested on charges of locking up her son for 28 years in her house.
Wow.
Yeah, so this was discovered after... So this woman, this 70-year-old woman, she went to the hospital. She wasn't feeling too good. She went to the hospital. And her relative, she went to this woman who went to the hospital's apartment because she wanted to pick some stuff up for her, right? And she goes in there, and she sees this man on the ground. And this man, doesn't have any teeth. He's covered in it's pretty gross. He's covered in sores, and just he looks quite unhealthy. I mean, as you would if you live in your house for 28 years without leaving.
Jeez.
And so this woman was arrested. She's denied all the charges, but the police said that there are no actual reported injuries on this guy. He's just really unhealthy. And so the relative who found this guy in this state said that she said, well, I knew she had a tight control over her son, but I didn't know it was this bad that she kept him in her house. Because this guy, by the way, was 41. He was pulled out of school when he was 12 by his mom. And now, at 41, he's finally been released. So... very sad story.
It's really sad.
This is not. This is uncommon, but cases like this have been seen throughout history. Obviously, the most famous one in Paris, which this woman was locked up for over 50 years, and the police went in there to get her. And when they discovered it, because one of those servants ratted her out, or one of the maids, I believe, and because they said they were just really suspicious, they knew it was happening, but it was a really rich family, and the girl originally wanted to marry a peasant in France because it was that time, and it was a lower class, and so he was a lower class lawyer, and the parents said no, you're not going to marry someone of such low class, so they locked up this girl in Paris for over 50 years. And when they found her, she was covered in her own feces, so in the police they had to leave the room after a few minutes because of how bad it smelled. So stuff like that has happened in history, but this girl, this woman, this happened yesterday, right, when they found this person in their house in Stockholm.
Do we have a motive? Or a possible one? Or it just seems like she's
denied all the charges, so she says she didn't even do it. Seems a little bit difficult to deny them when she's in your house, but, I guess innocent until proven guilty.
I guess.
All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you enjoyed all the stories.
I did.
The Indian one, of course, is the most important one, I would say. Very interesting. This is a big law, employs over half the population in India, so definitely keep an eye on that. But until then, we very much enjoyed being here today, so if you enjoyed, as you heard in our intro, you should definitely make sure to subscribe and leave a review. And what else should they do, Ian?
Well, they should make like Jorgy Porgy 1, 2, 3 and compliment my shoulders, and when they write a little paragraph after leaving a review on Apple Podcasts.
Actually, let's pick something different. Instead of shoulders, because we want to make a distinction between all the podcasts.
That's a good point.
So instead of Ian's shoulders, what should they compliment?
Your knees.
All right, compliment Ian's knees.
Oh, okay, my knees.
Yeah, compliment Ian's knees. My knees. I'm sensitive about my knees, you see. But Ian, he loves his knees, so compliment his knees when you leave a review. And if you do that, you too, just like Jorgy Porgy, will get a shout out in the next
and be
episode.
Our favorite listeners. Right now, Jorgy Porgy holds the gold.
So also make sure, again, to share, and the first link in the description of this podcast is the donation link.
Yes.
You can support us for literally $1 a month, so if you could just afford that, that would be awesome. It just shows that you guys actually appreciate the content that we're doing, but if not, please at least make sure to share and subscribe and leave a review, because that also helps us get more listeners. So I hope you guys have a great day. We are Politics 1001, and this is the World at Large. See you later.
Bye.